I am Chris from Airwindows, and we are here to do another nice little live stream, but it's going to be a coding stream today. So with a bit of luck, we can get some stuff done doing that. I am set up here with my laptop, and we're going to get stuff going. Now, I'm also thinking in terms of, can I check and see whether this is all working properly, but I think it probably is. Don't mind me, I'm just going to bounce on to Twitch here for a second. And that'll probably show me literally streaming right now, and it seems to. I don't know when people are going to show up, but it's all good. If I bounce over to YouTube, it should show me the same thing. And it is, and hey, two of you are actually here. Martin says hi from Argentina. Hi, Martin. Yeah, so here's what we'll do is sort of slowly get rolling doing this. I've got my coffee. I've got my microphone for helping me do this sort of thing. It's the same one that I'm using on Sundays. And I can tell you the new plan as far as how these streaming days work out. Because I'm on the back of a somewhat disconcerting week where I was trying to do a bunch of live streaming and music streaming. And the last couple of days didn't go the way that I'd hoped. I got heavily into trying to do psytrance in my system. And not only that, but psytrance with, on Friday, guitar added. And in my opinion, that did not work out. I didn't feel that it was giving me what I wanted. Excuse me for a second, I gotta go blow my nose. My nose is all stuffed up. I'm back. So the deal with that is I'm still very interested in doing music, but honestly it seems as if coding is more interesting to people. And I do have a bunch of that to do. So it seems to make pretty good sense that I might as well, do that. And I'm going to continue to do music, but I'm thinking that's going to be more along the lines of like Tuesday to Friday, and I'll just go on a sort of run and see what I can get out of it. Also, my streams will be color-coded now. For instance, blue means jamming, means music, probably techno music, or whatever, like drum and bass, just studio stuff, and possibly just drowned in reverb, a bunch of things like that. Green assuming this shows up as green, I think it's actually coming across as not as green as I would like, but that might be just my eyes fooling me because I'm looking at these green spotlights. That is coding. So we're going to, get Xcode up and going and work through whatever it is I've got in mind. And that also means I can do that from Saturday through to Monday, and the setup can kind of stay the same. And it's meant to be the matrix color, yes, although I'm not sure if it's looking that way. I'll have to look at it later when I'm not staring at green spotlights. And then if I get around to it, red can be like Analog Studio. And I'm thinking about getting back into the tracking using, stuff like Reaper or whatever. What I'm really interested in is whether I can get a DAW going that's simple and free and works, and do Airwindows Free Studio using a DAW that's also free. Because I'm very used to Logic. I'm a big fan of Reaper, but Reaper is not free. Reaper costs money. And there are things out there that you can get that are actually free. And it seemed to me that when I do that kind of music, sometimes people seem to absolutely hate it, but sometimes that is a tip-off. Like, what will happen is you can do something like that, and then the more some people hate it, the more other people will find it good. Like, you can't go by, I did this thing, therefore does everybody love it. That doesn't ever work. It's not ever going to be everybody loves the thing. But today, and I'm not sure when I'm going to be getting into this red zone of analog stuff. One of the things I did find out about on Friday was that when I do my guitar sounds through the current rig that I've got, and Bro 77 has been constantly reacting to my Strat or whatever playing, running through the rig with the Fender Rhodes. That's DI. That is not a guitar amplifier. If I run into a guitar amplifier, I can get a way bigger sound. And when I do that, even though it worked really badly, I thought, you can go back and check it if you want. I thought it sucked. But the guitar stuff over the attempt at psytrance, and that means like kick, bass, bass, bass very fast, I wasn't able to make the bass work properly in that. And also picked like chords in the Lydian mode where I thought my soloing wasn't actually on point. And just a lot of stuff that wasn't working out. But the guitar sounds I was getting were great in their own right. They just weren't in the right place. So I will be getting into this red studio zone for just arranging songs and things that sound like, I don't know, your 70s prog kind of stuff. And if some people hate that stuff and throw up and call me names, that will only make me do more of it out of spite, or because I recognize that sometimes when people respond with just sheer loathing, you want to look at the kind of people and what they actually want out of you. And if they want something that is opposite to what you're trying to do, then their loathing is a good tip-off that you're getting a reaction by being what you want to be as hard as you can. But for now, let's get back into that coding zone. And again, Grebule says the matrix color. Yep. And what we're going to do with the coding zone. Oh, you encourage the red zone? Please do. Because that's the thing. I was talking with somebody who means a lot to me today. about all of that. And they were like, only listen to the people with the medium opinions. People are like, that's okay. Because everybody who's either too extremely into it or too extremely hating it, you got to ignore them because they're the extremes. It's like, well, yeah, but what I do, I'm more interested in finding that person who wants something very specific and nailing it so hardcore that they're like, wow, you made my entire week. That's amazing. And to do that, you have to also be hitting the people who are going to hate it and having them be like, oh my God, quit forever. You're the worst. And that's the only way to get there. It is the only way to get there. So by all means, encourage the red zone. But most of my music is going, like when I don't have the energy to arrange and design something. And remember, one of the things that I'm going to do here, let's remember these. The arrangement cards, which I may be able to print out and actually have these for realsies at some point. But I've got them kind of worked out. I just haven't worked with them very much. These are my method for coming up with sequences of contrasting tonal styles and making a track out of them that does stuff and goes places. When I'm doing the music jams that are just like a continuous stretch for 80 minutes, usually it's picking one color, like this kind and calm green color, or something like that, picking some kind of mode. Here's one, sad and full and purple in 5/4. Picking some kind of thing, and then just setting to jamming on it, and just kind of going. I'm comfortable doing that. I've done it kind of a lot. And I can always do it if I can't think of anything more rigorous to do. But I'm interested in diving into the more rigorous thing. And what that probably is going to mean is doing music jams where it's not playing continually. In particular, what I might do is either go into the music tracking thing or start out in Bespoke and figure out how to get Bespoke to output multitrack. There is a multitrack mode that it has, and be able to dump the raw stuff that I'm working with, including anything that I might do in samplers, into tracks that I can then overdub things over. And that would be a method of doing stuff that was more substantially worked out. But this is just me sort of blue skying, or green skying as you might have it right here. And for now, I'm switching over, since it is Saturday, and tomorrow's going to be Sunday. Tomorrow is for posting a plugin. And then Monday, as we've previously had, this is going to be coding day. And I think it's perfectly reasonable to do 3 days of coding day, because I've got a lot of stuff to get done. Like, among other things, what we've got here is the, here, let's go and look at the signed version. This is the most recent release. These are the plugins that I've got, which are available in all programs from old school VST, old school AU, going back to PowerPC machines, and going forward all the way to the most recent M1 machines, signed and made to work with modern OSs. As far as more modern OSs on things other than Macs, that's probably going to be Clap. That's probably because I'm legally licensed to do VST 2.4, but not VST 3. I never signed off on that. There was a time when it would have forbidden me to do VST 2.4 ever again, and that would be too high of a cost. So this is everything. And you know, one of the things I'm going to need to do for instance here is, oh, well this is actually, I'd better not change anything here because this is the signed version that I've just opened in the old Xcode. I'm amazed that it opened. I guess I'll find out whether I just broke it that way. That's the thing to worry about when you're working with retro stuff and then you're working with modern stuff. I bet if I had hit save, it would have killed it for the modern one. So over to the older version, and this can be built under the retro version, which is what you see here. The reason it looks a little crunchy is because I worked out that I need to run the laptop in 720p, as you can see here. Send it to the compositor at 720p, and then multiply it by exactly 3. And that gives us about as clear of a picture of the coding that I'm doing as I can reasonably get. Barring some really sophisticated video capture that I could send 1440 by 900 and get that into OBS at 1440 by 900. And even if I did that, the scaling would still be kind of messy. Come to think of it, I wonder if I can actually scale better. Give me a second. So here's OBS. I'm to the side of the mic, but hopefully you can still hear me. So here's OBS. It'll remember everything that I change here. Here's our scaling filter. That is the simplest. Well, we could try sharpen scaling, I suppose. And our output is just straight up. Now I'm trying to figure out what the scaling up is going to look like. Advanced. That might be suitable. I think that might be a little bit clearer. Yeah, maybe a little crunchy, but I feel like that's maybe a little bit clearer. That's about as good as we're going to get. So let's leave that at that for the time being. And my point being, I've got a lot of coding to do, and I'll show you why. See everywhere it says long double here? Now, one of the things I've talked about is that I've done an experiment with a recent plugin. Specifically, it is the most recent plugin. Hyperson X should be the one that you get this coming Sunday. Unless we get really enthusiastic and between today and tomorrow we come up with an amazing new plugin. That's always possible, I suppose. And here is Hypersonic kernel. And you can see that we have double precision numbers. And double precision numbers here. Let's quit out of there. And we've got these double precision numbers, which are about 5 million times more resolution than you get off of using floats, using 32-bit floats. I've essentially made a big deal out of running a double precision bus or more. And what I've been doing with all of my plugins for years now is coding them all to run at long double precision and then dithering down to whatever lesser precision I'm using. And this has a lot of value for 32-bit buses, such as Core Audio on the Mac, or some forms of VST. Having that much more resolution on the loud bits of the sound means that every little processing that you do has, again, about 5 million times more resolution for the peaks of the waveform. Because where they get close to 1.0 or -1, that's when the floating point gets into the zone where the resolution of the part of the sound that you're recording is around 25-bit, and doing enough calculations on that will degrade. It'll start wearing off. I've been using long double, so the resolution that I'm using is about 500 billion times better than just straight up floating point, which will be quantizing to about 25-bit at the louder parts of the wave. Once you get into quiet sounds, it no longer matters because the bit depth just keeps increasing the closer you get to silence. And there's a lot of room for that to go. So that's not a concern, but you start losing your grip on the louder bits of the waveform, and it just builds up with the more processing that you do. So what I've been considering is that, and I have some talk back on this actually, because one of the things that's happened is I've talked about this, and then I've had at least one person go, "No, do not compromise. Do not do long double. I have a powerful computer. I want to use it for all of the sound quality that you can possibly have. Don't take away my long double bus. I believe in you. I believe in this." That's all very cool. I appreciate it. That said, if I think it is excessive and I can deliver the same sound quality over an entire mix, running the double precision rather than long double, and 5 million times, I think it's about 5 million times better resolution on the waveform than 32-bit, rather than 500 billion times more resolution, and doing that gets you like 5 times the plugin efficiency, I'm inclined to go with that because I'm using this stuff myself. And I'm finding that the rig that I set up for Bespoke, the stuff that I'm using there, once I have like 16 tracks coming in and I'm doing processing on them and I'm running the full console system, I start getting to where it's running my system too hard. And I'm also running at 96K. That puts an additional load on it. I think you stand to gain a lot more from running at 96K using the ultrasonic filtering that I've been talking about than you do from like running at 44.1K on 32-bit based, plugins and oversampling stuff. Like, there's a lot more to gain from designing it the way that I have in mind. And part of that is being able to have the plugins be that much more efficient that you can easily run a big old mix at 96 or even 192K. Supposing we were doing it in such a way that you had your 44.1K mix and you're using all the Airwindows plugins, and I do a change where I'm trading off some of this resolution on the bus, but it lets you do the same thing that you were doing at 44.1K at 192, including the ultrasonic filtering that's built into some of my systems, like console. I think that would be a big win. I do. So one of the things I'm going to be doing with these coding days is getting into it and starting to go through the process of, first of all, storing all of this. What I'll do is I'll make a nice little backup of the original code, the stuff that I've got on GitHub. And I can do it kind of like this, for instance. If I do that, I'm making a nice little backup of everything that's on the GitHub. And the GitHub can continue to change. I can continue to update it. But I can put this up on Mediafire or something. And then people can have access to exactly how all of the plugins were before I started doing this massive change. In fact, that's a fine idea, so let me do exactly that. It's not really going to take 21 minutes. It's going to take a bit. Not even, actually. It's doing pretty well, considering this is the antique laptop. But once you have this, once I put this up in Mediafire or whatever, I can start going in there and changing everything on GitHub. And then you don't have to use fancy Git controls to get back to the previous version of everything. Like here, I can put this on Mediafire or whatever, and we'll call it long double Airwindows archive. And I can put that up, and then I will simply start recompiling everything. One of the things I suspect I can do is doing stuff kind of like this. If I'm not mistaken, bubble. Okay, that will break everything. I believe I can do this. Let's see what happens. Here's Airwindows. Here's plugins. So if I do find all, it's gonna change everything in build. So I'll need to delete all the build, but this is exactly what I'd need to do. And some of this is old stuff, but nothing should actually bust by making a change and having this turn from long double automatically everything over to being double precision. I believe using this, as long as everything is what I expect to see here, like here is all the instances where this showed up. For instance, we've got acceleration. That is an older thing, but under every circumstance, the plugins should run by just automatically changing everything here. It's a very major change, but all the same, I should be able to simply change every instance of long double as long as it is what they said, the entire word, to double. And all the plugins will still run. I simply have to recompile them. I have to recompile all of them because this is also going to include all of the signed, all of the VSTs, all of the signed VSTs. Everything has to be recompiled from A to Z. But because this choice doesn't run into any situations where the word long double isn't the definition of the variable, like this is all code. I can basically do that on the entire code base and go from there, then simply start recompiling everything. like one thing at a time. It could take a while to do this, but as you might imagine, because my system only the Linux ones I can automate this, but the Linux ones have a special problem, which is that it is built off the same code that I use for the Windows ones, and so ironically, even though on Linux I could build all of these and then recompile all of them in a single script, the way I've been handling the Linux stuff involves going in and kind of doing things manually, and that makes it more awkward. But yeah, this is all the stuff that I would need to change in order to make all the plugins run X number of times faster with no audible difference, because that's my suspicion, is the amount of overkill that I'm doing. And I've been told this, but I don't always listen to what people tell me. It's like, that's the reason I would have a backup of all of the plugins as well. Just the complete collection downloadable, as these are the ones running the long double bus, just in case anybody wants the more difficult to run versions of everything, because otherwise it's all going to be replaced with double precision, and then everything across the board will run X number of times faster than it did, depending upon how much is there, because stuff is running fairly comparable to other people's plugins. But the thing is, if I can make everything run 3 to 5 times faster, well then, all your Airwindows mixes become that much more efficient, and you'd be able to do that much more with them. And so would I, because I'll be doing that. I have to set up to be able to take the entire thing on the road, and that means running everything on an M1 laptop that, for whatever reasons, I can compile it with M1 and I have M1 native plugins, but they're still running all long double. And the fact that they can keep up with like my desktop machine, which is among the biggest of the old Intel stuff, who's to say whether I can't get much, much more efficient with these things? I mean, we can but try. That's also something that has to, like, I'm going to be getting into sound design stuff, like trying to do audio out of the Surge synthesizer. And that poses its own interesting problems, because Surge is an open source project and something that I think is well worth people getting involved in if they're interested in sound synths. There's a wide variety of stuff. Here, let me grab some of my notes. Got these over here. I have the firm intention of making banks of sounds out of Surge. And these are my notes on the basis of what I'm going to do. Grand Prairie, Alberta is a place that I had to fly into to go to Canada and visit my lady. But this stuff is the oscillators that you can use. Note that we've got FM oscillators. There's a sine oscillator with an interesting feedback effect. There's just a bunch of stuff in here. There's a Car Plus Strong string oscillator. You got classic and modern. You'll have different tonalities for those oscillators. If one of them is your original Surge and the other one is the modern concept of it, which takes more CPU. There's an oscillator called Twist, which is all the oscillators out of plates, mutable instruments. And so I made some notes on that, like what you can do with those things. Harmonic oscillators, chord oscillators, which are not equal temperament. So you can generate chord stuff off of the Twist oscillator in Surge that generates interesting kind of tonalities. And you would never know this if you're like, oh, let's play a chord, so let's play a chord on the synthesizer. No, you can do it with a particular oscillator that's out of mutable instruments, previously found in Eurorack, but it's available in Surge for free as open source because the mutable stuff is open source. And we can do all of these things. The twist oscillator has a different FM than the Surge FM. You've got even more twist oscillator stuff that wasn't working for me when I tried it. But there's my notes on that. And then lastly, I made notes on the filters that Surge had. And of course, Surge is the synth that is contemplating having my Z filters as one of their available filters. So we've got these for different like tonalities of filters in Surge. It's deep. There's a lot going on there. And this is the way that I described them. So I'm going to be doing sound design and coming up with stuff to do in Surge for having like a lot of different tones available. And that might be, I don't know, it could be blue days or red days as far as the live streaming it. But I do intend to be doing that on stream. And we'll be building sounds out of Surge. But one of the things about Surge is deeply committed to running a 32-bit internal bus. All of its internal calculations are 32-bit. Everything that I've said about you wind up degrading the sound by running too much calculation on 32-bit floats as far as your main audio bus is concerned, holds with Surge. It's got all that flexibility, but I find that it doesn't have the sonority of other synthesizers, competing synthesizers that are not as open source, that are running a double precision bus. So the question becomes, like, there's a pile of additional synths in the Surge project, sort of around the back of that. Like there's a one called Monique that's kind of neat. Monique is a monosynth, and what it does is it's a monosynth with a strange mixing matrix that lets you run through filters in series. And Surge will let you do that as well. But Monique seems to have a distinctive sound doing that. And, you know, the idea is you can have Surge as the 32-bit, highly optimized. You can get more processing out of this, more voices, more stuff to do, because it will take the depth of the things you attempt to do to the absolute limit. You will not be able to do as much as you can do in Surge with a soft synth that's based on a double precision bus. But you can also have soft synths on a double precision bus and get like the sonority that I like to get out of the analog stuff and go with that. You can kind of have both. And one of the things I'll be doing with that is recompiling all the Airwindows plugins. And I need to tell the Surge folks, guys, do this. I'm going to start to do this. And the stuff that you've brought into Surge already as part of their FX stuff, my plugins are in there already. Change those long doubles to doubles. Everything will run a little bit faster. You'll be able to get a little bit more mileage out of it, and it will still give you the same result as it had previously. I don't know whether maybe they've done this already. They could, but hey, Shay. Hey, Lingle. Who are you folks? Are you spammers? You seem to have very short names. Hopefully not. If you are, then you're wasting your time and you're the only person watching this stream probably, but hi, if you're there. And let us get back into something that we were doing. That's the VST. We're not worried about that. Last week we did a bunch of stuff on stereo chorus. For instance, you won't be able to hear it because this microphone is mono, so I'm streaming a mono output, but I'll be able to hear it. And that's a sawtooth wave. If I go to recent effects, This is the stereo chorus that I previously had. So what we're... Oh, no separate color code for sound design? Well, that's a fair question. Shall we experiment with some? Like, what would you call that? Would you... maybe cyan? Cyan is kind of light blue? Or... purple? How's that grab you? Cyan for sound design? Let me know. You were the first person to mention this, and so I'll let you pick. But for now, we are in green for coding. Basically, when I flood the room with a single color of LED light, everything becomes black and white to me. Like what I'm seeing off of the OBS here, I can't see any color changes. If I hold up this little thingy, which is the LED controller, I stop being able to see the color that it is. Like, gee, green here looks gray to me because everything is just gray. So my eyes are adapting to that, and which is not a bad thing because it's like, okay, people watching can have the color thing to tell them instantly what mode I'm in, but it doesn't have to distract me as far as like, oh, I'm looking at a bright color. Anyways, I've been doing stereo chorus, and here's the thing. I had the intention of incorporating something into that. And let's do that today, and then we'll call it a day. Oh, you're liking purple? Okay, I'll try to bear that in mind. I'll come up with a suitable purple as far as the stream color, because I like the color codes, because the kinds of things that I'll be doing are very different. For instance, blue has generally meant I'm doing techno and synthesizer streaming. It's Eurorack based, or it's something like that. It's what I'm doing in Bespoke, for instance. And there's continuous music going on. I'm very likely capturing it to a recording, but it's not going to be stopping. I'm not going to be halting and being like, okay, let's work on the beginning of that again. Instead, it's just like, okay, put this on and it'll make noises and you can enjoy the techno music or whatever. And it'll just flow for as long as I go with it. So the color coding can tell you what's going to happen. And if it's green, I'm plugin coding, so I can answer questions much more easily, that I'm not focusing on having to make music or play guitar or something. And the end result will be the plugins, and I'll also happily answer questions of how this stuff is done, how you do the coding in C. Technically it's C++, but I'm not using the full features of C++, nor should you. And purple would be fine. As for, I'll have to check in and see how that looked. I'm going to be getting more of these lights going on. In fact, they're supposed to be arriving today. All they are is just Amazon.com spotlights with this cheesy little controller here. This is the kind of thing that you get off of cheap-ass Amazon spotlights, and it is an RGB controllable spotlight. It has some like color modes, but I'm liking just the overall wash of color kind of thing. Also, when I do the live streaming, I'm also doing like leftist bisexual lighting, and I'll keep on with that unless I get too disenchanted with how some of those folks are behaving. Because recently I ran across one that was using the blue light, but then there's a red side light on you. That's a trope that a lot of folks did. I think they picked it up from ContraPoints originally, and other people have run with that, and it's become almost recognizable. And then lately, it's like folks that shouldn't really count themselves as leftist are also using that and like attacking people that I like. And if there's too much of that, we'll just go full on blue for music days. Long as I can tell the color. I need to make a special little light for lighting up my patch colors, just so that I can have a glimpse of what the actual colors are. Because if everything is entirely one color, I can no longer color code things because I can't see what they are. Alrighty, so where were we at? We were at stereo ensemble, but not just stereo ensemble, because I have a purpose to do here. Or not stereo ensemble either, stereo chorus. As you can see, I've got a couple more of these lined up. We'll be grinding through them as best as we can. And I'm going to be wanting to work with this. This is exactly how stereo chorus existed back in the day. It's exactly the code. Up to and including some of these weird choices, like I do not need to have uint32. This can just say int. And in fact, if I'm not using count here, no, I am. Oh, no, wait. We have another instance of that, meaning that there's no reason I can't refactor. So what I just changed there was making it so that this variable is defined only in here where I'm actually using it. Because as it turns out, it worked, but I have one of those elsewhere. That's within this context. And then when we run this, we've got this while, and it makes another context. And I was quietly also making another variable called count in here. And it did not complain that I was doing that, but that's the kind of stuff that can get you in trouble. Like if I went count here and then count is 1, and I'm expecting to refer to that, and then in here I go, oh, hi, int count equals gcount, but some of this code expected to be able to use what I had defined it up there, I just made stuff more complicated for no reason. So it's better to just define it within whatever context it is. You know, there's reasons for all this kind of stuff, but what we were doing, and when I say what we were doing, I mean this is what I'm going to be doing today. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's what I was doing, but what we're going to be doing today is a quick little enhancement on this, because this does not adjust for sample rate. The original one didn't have that going on. So what I'm going to be wanting to do is bring in my undersampling code. And I can find that in another one of the plugins. I think it's kind of later in the... oh, there we go. I think tape delay 2 will have it. Let's find out. So here's our tape delay 2. And I can check by looking in the H file. That is actually the CPP file, but if I switch it over to the H file, here's tape delay 2, and under here, we've got some stuff in here. Hey, Millyoung777. Is that a Kirby? Is that what you always do, is the Kirby going, take my energy? This stuff is part of the calculating that's done in the undersampling. So what I'm going to do is have a look at this stuff. I think regen filter and last ref are also part of the undersampling. Let's get a closer look. Will I undersample bass drive? Do we have bass drive out? Is it out in the, yeah, I would if I have time. Not only that, I'd make it run on double precision, because as you'll notice, a bunch of this stuff says float 64, and I could change that to say double, but this is also running on a long double bus. It's using a double precision dry sample, but this could be edited. Let's have a closer look at this. So here's our undersampling code. This is an earlier version of dry-wet calculation. Actually, not an earlier version, but this is the version of dry-wet that I did for verbity, where you turn it up to 0.5 and both things are at full volume, and then you start losing dry. So the way that works is being able to add more of the wet of whatever it is without affecting dry balance. And that means the 0.5 is actually quite loud, but that's fine, because it means that you can adjust either the dry volume or the wet volume at different places in the control without altering what else is there. And here we go. We've got last ref as part of input sample. So basically, I'm just trying to keep track of what I'm doing here, because maybe I'll look at another one. I'm confusing myself a little bit. So yeah, let's not change that because I don't remember what I did. Tape delay 2 was undersampled. What else is undersampled? How about iron oxide classic 2? I think that's undersampled. See, it says last ref and int cycle. Int cycle is the, oh, do we have an upward compressor plugin? I don't know if I do. I mean, I think like pressure can be used as a upward, or certainly earlier versions of it can be used as a New York style compressor, and that's kind of like an upward compressor. Anything that is dry wet can be used as an upward compressor. I mean, as far as gain levels are concerned, everything is an upward compressor. Let's focus on this for now. I could be writing this down on paper to help keep track of what the hell I'm doing, but for now, let's not. So it looks like I want to keep an eye on the array last ref and the variable cycle, and that is my undersampling thing. So let's open up Stereo Chorus. We'll open this up, and I'm not going to alter this here, but I'm going to alter it elsewhere. Last ref 7 is what I need, and cycle. Then over to the Stereo Chorus window, and I'll put this after everything. Space it properly. And let's start putting in double so that it's a little more like I'd have to change that for the VST anyhow, so I might as well just go forwards and do it. In fact, for fun, let's do all of these things except for FPD. I mean, this technically might be part of keeping it exactly the same as the previous, but I'm telling you, float 64 means double. It is signed, and it's double precision, and that's what that's going to mean. And signed int 32 means int. So when we port this to VST, it'll be a little easier not having to do that and change these things. Actually, I think uint32t will also work on... Anyways, see where we've added double last ref 7? That is our undersampling code getting ready to be used. And we're also going to put it in to here. This little chunk. Copy. Back over here. And again, undersampling code, so I want it to look like a little module, a little unit, apart from the other stuff. That way, if I'm looking this up and going like, where can I find the undersampling code? If I look up stereo chorus, it's like, oh, there it is. And I see it as a distinct little place in here. People do all kinds of things as far as separating stuff out. I'm just trying to work out how I can make this be easily understandable. And you know, I don't need these brackets, because if you have a for loop and there's only one statement, it'll use that one statement. If I put brackets, I can have multiple statements in there, but I don't actually have multiple statements, like up here. I need the brackets, and often people use the brackets by putting like carriage returns in and spacing it out a little bit. I generally lump stuff together when I want it to be a tight little unit, but this requires the brackets because otherwise it would only do the count thing and increment this one and then wouldn't use this one until it was done with the for loop. So I need the brackets, so I need the for loop to apply to both of these things in here. But with this, I've only got one thing, so I'm not going to have the brackets there. I guess I had them because it's what I thought made sense at the time, but in this case, I do not. And now, let's take the undersampling code in here. So these things are not being... I am initializing this stuff up here. And then what I need to do in here is this is the chunk for this place in the code. And it's going immediately after overall scale, so I need an instance of overall scale in here. I'm not going to update it, but I'll tell you what I can do. Just in case I've left that out of stereo chorus, let's copy all of this, including where it instantiates overall scale. And then here's stereo chorus. Oh, look, I did have it actually being there. I will convert this to double precision again, like we've been doing. And this is now set up, cycle, as a factor of how many times we're multiplying the overall sample rate. Like if it's 44.1K, we're going at 1. But if we are doing something like 192K, that's going to be 4 times. And if we're doing some kind of weird intermediate thing, like we're able to run 96K, but we're at like 130 or whatever, yeah. 3 for silly people means if we're using something intermediate, it will still function. And it will function correctly, but it's not necessarily going to take you all the way to 192 or 176K, because that would take you all the way to 4. 2 is going to be what normally happens, I think. So there we are. back over to Iron Oxide Classic 2. And here we're going to just fill up the screen with windows. People aren't chatting right now, so that's no problem. The way I'm doing this, it's a little bit restrictive in size. And one of the things we can see about this is that I do have our cycle stuff installed in this already. But what I'm going to want to do is go to Iron Oxide Classic and find where I'm doing the undersampling. So Iron Oxide Classic is doing a denormalization thing. Here I'm doing it, well, I think it may be, maybe I'm not. No, I am. All of my stuff, I'm doing a denormalization thing, which is calculated to sound like basically analog circuit noise at a very, 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 very quiet level. Only when that is present. And that's going to keep everything from ever stumbling across denormalization issues. But if we're not at that incredibly microscopic level, it's not going to do a thing to change it. And the values I've got in here sort of fade into the noise factor. And then if the signal coming through has the noise factor already enabled, it won't add more. It will just have the 1. This is a high pass for leaning the stuff out, like it says. And I believe I'm doing that before applying the iron oxide calculation. And let's see, where do we get into this? Here we go. So, before we get into this stuff, boop, we have to add this. Here's our stereo chorus. So this is where that goes. Notice what's happening here. We've got a bracket. That means everything inside of what we're about to do is contained inside this. Cycle plus plus, and if cycle equals cycle end, means only when cycle gets to this point do you run everything inside here. So we're sandwiching all of this, and there's the bracket. Normally everything is indented. I'm just not bothering because with this kind of stuff, there's a bunch of stuff piled inside this. But here's the stuff we've got here. And then there is the end of what we placed there. And then after that, we've got this output thingy here, which is not actually inside the undersampling code. The undersampling code is doing the stuff here. So what I've got it set up to do is this. There's the end bracket. And there's our information for how to do it. And so it looks a little funny. But in fact, I can tighten this up a little bit, come to think of it. I don't have to, but I could. And I pasted the stuff before the end bracket. Like right here. That should have been indenting everything, except for that's being pasted into something that already existed. And this is one side of everything contained within this only fires once every 4 samples at 192K, or once every 2 samples at 96K. And then this is the other side of the sandwich. You see the bracket here is what sandwiches everything in the middle in the undersampling. And that's what's going to make it behave itself as far as running at higher sample rates and also run more efficiently. Because that would be everything. So now I can simply close that. I don't see any further chat, so it's like, okay, we'll go from there. I think this old-ass version of Xcode doesn't actually have a good... Well, reindent might do it. I might play with that, see what it gets. But here we go. And hang on. So there's the output of my calculations. There's the dither, and there is the... let's see if this undersampling is in fact stereo. No, it is not. Okay. So now what I got to do is, that's all fine, and in fact this stuff up front was fine. But I need to find a last ref. Let's fire up Text Wrangler and find which thing is going to solve this for me. So several of my things are being changed here. And in fact, I could go into the VST for the answer to this question, but I'm not going to. So what I'm searching for here is last ref L bracket. And if I find that, it means that I'm going to have the undersampling code used on a stereo thing, or the undersampling code used on a VST, because my VSTs are running stereo by default. Let's see if it exists in a audio unit or if it exists only on the VSTs. That's a VST because it says Air2 proc. Bright ambience proc. Chamber proc. Energy 2 proc. All this stuff that says proc, that means that that is verbity, bright ambience again, galactic. Oh, well, hang on. I've got it in galactic. There we go. So let's quit out of that, and then we've got stereo course. Iron oxide classic is not actually what we wanted, but we can look into the AU and go to G for galactic. Galactic is one plugin which I would probably want to do a version of that and see whether the long double bus is actually sounding better. Because that is the entire space that Galactic creates is a very deep ambience of the kind where you should be able to make out a distinction in these bus length things. And some of that stuff, like ambiences and reverbs and delays and things, you start being able to hear the details of that stuff and the way you designed it. So let's have a look firstly. Last ref R, I'm apparently using cycle. I'm putting cycle there. I've got last ref in here. That's my undersampling. I don't know why I have Thunder, but I guess I built it into this somewhere. And then here's the parts we need to change. We're in stereo. That means we're still doing this, but the parts that changed in our stereo chorus I should have a last ref L and a last ref R. I don't think I actually need a cycle L and a cycle R. I believe that is not the case. But, and notice how now that I'm doing a left and right, I do have to have those brackets there. So we'll just leave that there. Cycle won't, this stuff won't actually change. That's going to be the same regardless of how many channels I've got. This only refers to cycle, so this part isn't going to change either, but see how we opened this with this bracket, and then we've got this stuff going on, and this needs to run only once every X many samples. And then we've got this stuff. Here's where I need to dive into Galactic. And get out the relevant code. Because see, cycle plus plus, cycle end. Here's where we start doing one of X many samples. And in this case, it's all indented. For Galactic, I had it look correct. And where's my end paren, or my end bracket? That seems weird. I'm not quite sure how this is working. So that highlighted the stuff on this else statement. So I'm trying to work out, where does this relate to? Will that actually highlight? No. So that's a pain in the butt. I got to figure out how this works. We will do our level best. Because this has furnished confusion to me in a way that I don't appreciate. This needs to work in a particular way. I wonder whether, in fact, this is in working order. There might be a bug fix in here somewhere. That or this is containing a smaller area in here, and there's a bracket in here somewhere. Let's look at the stereo chorus. How this is supposed to work is like this. See how we've got this, and then this stuff should be indented, except for it's not. In fact, it won't run properly this way, but I can at least hack it with the format. Let's re-indent. Did that do anything? I'm gonna say no. Oh, pff. Okay, here's your problem. It doesn't necessarily re-indent everything. How about if I select everything and then tell that to re-indent? Okay, that got it to work. So this is now the indents that you want. And this stuff should be contained inside this. Now, what have we here? Do we have something where Galactic is actually not functioning the way we want? That would suck. That's an important plugin. I use that. Well, let's tell you to re-indent and see where we get. So here's where we go into the X many cycles. And we've got this stuff stuck in here. No, this is still right. Because we go into our X many cycles like this. If it is at cycle end, we do the thing. Then, and maybe that means that the iron oxide one has a concern. And this is not asking whether you're on the relevant sample. What it's doing is it's filling in this other stuff as needed. So once you're done doing all that calculation, you don't necessarily just switch off. Instead, it's making a little, it's making last_ref contain a set of buffered samples that are either 4, 3, or 2 long. And that means that once it's finished doing that kind of stuff, and if cycle end is 1, then it always will just give you the one that it's using. And then if it's not, then it will take the other ones and put in what it used here. Which means I take this entire chunk, not including the end filter, copy that. So this is in fact working correctly. Here's the part where you had it go into the area where at the relevant time we're doing this amount of this. And this is what we're doing. And this should not be at that level. Instead, it should be at this level. So let's... Oh, hello. Do we just lose every damn thing? I think we did. Well, no matter. That was something that I needed to get out of Galactic anyhow. So we'll get it again. There it is. Copy, please, sir. And then here's where we paste that in. And if we refactor that, as in reformat it, re-indent it, this should now be correct. Stereo, of course, only has this going on. And here's our fill in the higher sample rate stuff. Here's how you get to there. Here's how you get into there. And here's how we build it and see if we have an error. Well, we have one error, and I bet I know why. We need 2 of these. Oh, and we're not indented properly. Oh, dum-de-dum. Tell you what, let's tell it to indent properly. We just did this thing. We'll do it again. Re-indent. Huh, it wanted to be jammed right up against the edge of the screen. Fine. And, yeah, I would have thought that it would indent this differently, but oh well. But here's where we went wrong. L and R. It wants these to be there. Now let's try to build it again. Hey! And we can close Galactic. Let's not save that. Let's leave it the way it was. And having built this, we now have an instance of stereo chorus that we can use and test out. I gotta go in here to get it though. QRS stereo chorus, here we are. And I'll option drag that to our desktop. And then drag that to the components folder. And now we're going to test it. You'll probably be able to hear whether it's doing this right. Here's a 44.1K version of Alien Kittens. Let us now run this into the stereo chorus and hear what it sounds like, to some extent anyhow. I can hear the stereo, you won't be able to. Do we still work? I'm going to say that's working. Especially at this very low speed. This is what people wanted out of this behavior, so I need to leave this the same. And I hear the way that it's splitting to the sides in an extreme manner. Now the question becomes, does it act the same at 192K? Let's find out. That's what I have this here for. Or, for instance, does it crash or not sound right? I'm going to say that's about right. I think it sounds a little nicer at 192K, but that's undersampling for you. Same information, but it's getting more samples to play with to make its stuff happen. I'm going to call that proof of concept. I'm going to say that this plugin is now enabled for high sample rate without running all that much more in the way of processing, because it's running the actual calculations once every 4 samples. And it's going to sound the same and have its pitches and speeds and things run about the same. So that's why I've invented the undersampling. So tell you what I'm now going to do. I'm going to replicate this stuff across stereo doubler and stereo ensemble and then call it a day. Seeing as I don't have a lively chat, I mean, people want to hang around and ask questions, by all means do so. I am more than happy to answer them. I don't need to keep streaming if there's nobody hanging out asking questions. But I might as well keep streaming as long as I have coding to do. No particular reason not to just be available and hang out for people as long as I have tedious grunt work to do. And that is something that I have indeed got to do. So, let's load up stereo doubler. And let's load up stereo ensemble. And we'll just expand out all the stereo plugins and see what we can get out of them. Because it's going to be exactly the same undersampling technique for each one. That's why I'm doing this in this way. I'm keeping it all kind of the same so that I can be consistent. I'm just going to indent those in there. For whatever reason, I seem to like having this stuff indented that way. And that's going to be the same. The nice thing about it is that otherwise it doesn't have to grind away doing super heavy processing for something like this when you don't necessarily have a call for it. Like, these things can have the same sounds they had in the original plugin. And that does mean stepping on the sample rate rather than running the sample rate at full crank. But for some of these like vintage plugins, the tone they have is part of how that works. Let's see, stereo doubler, and then stereo ensemble is here. So I'll move that down just a hair and then make sure that I can have that in there. We'll save you and close that. And now we're going to go to, this is why to do things in a certain way sometimes. Like, I'm going to grab that out of the C++ file and go to the same place in the corresponding file. There's a lot more here, but I'm putting it in there after the code of the plugin, but before the code of this FPL here, which what this is doing is that is giving me a random number using rand, which blocks, by the way. I have to update some of my stuff to use this FBD rather than rand in the code of the plugin, especially on Linux. Rand blocks until I can get a truly random number, so you can't be using that inside the audio buffer, or it'll just eat the processing. Hey, Nancy Sasberg, looks like I see a comma there, so you have a question. Don't mind me, just going through and doing now stereo ensemble the same way. And, shoot, let me see what you've got. And thankfully, since I've organized this the way that I have, I can just grind through this almost unthinkingly because I did the thinking part ahead of time. And then this needs to be in where I define overall scale. If I haven't defined it in some of these other ones, I'll need to, but that's fine. If I have defined it, I'll go and find where it is. Here's process. There's our overall scale. And there is overall scale with cycle. Yeah, go ahead and ask. And don't delay, because it's like I'm moving through this fairly fast because I can. There's our defining of cycle for these other two, not just stereo chorus. What's the reason for using the undersampling on these stereo effects? They have time-based processing, and in some cases they are using delay lines. Stereo ensemble in particular, but also stereo chorus and stereo doubler. These are using delay lines. If I have a delay line that's 100 samples long, it's going to be this amount of time at 44.1K. If I have a delay line that's 100 samples long, at 192K, it's a quarter the length. It cuts off the space that it can take, and that shifts everything up 2 octaves, first of all, if it's a pitch-based thing. And if it's a delay length, like stereo ensemble has echoes in it. If I was to run it at 192K, I would have to define 4 times the delay buffer in stereo ensemble. And then if you weren't running 192K all the time, it would just be wasted space. Plus, some of this stuff is generating a particular tone, and you don't necessarily need to have all of those individual samples. What you would need to do is, for instance, with the things that are using the undersampling, if you're doing a dry-wet control, you want to be able to have the dry sample continue to be 192K. if you have a delay type effect and it has a particular tone in it and you made the tone work exactly the way that you wanted at 44.1K, then undersampling it and having it run the same code at 192K but with a interpolation effect going on means it'll gain a particular color and tonality. It'll still keep the guts of the code. It'll be more efficient. It'll use a quarter of the delay buffers, which in something like a reverb, you've got a lot of delay buffers going on. In something like stereo ensemble, you've got a lot of delay buffers. Well, 2 delay buffers, but a lot of delay taps going on. And it's just this, I like this method of working with high sample rates on these delay-based effects. You can, of course, also use a high sample rate and a delay that's also at 192K. But that's strictly a digital delay effect. If you've got it at that fine granularity and you're taking a delay tap off of that, it's going to be very much a digital delay effect. And there's uses for that. For instance, if you're doing a flanger, I could see running a flanger and not undersampling it, just so that you could get the cancellation to sweep right out of the human hearing range. Yeah, and I do tend to set the ring buffers to not waste any space. It's all part of trying to get the plugins running more efficiently. Speaking of which, let me see whether I've caught up. I just did this, and I just added it to those. So the next step is going in here and grabbing this bit. Not necessarily a tape sample. And there's stereo. Everything's going to be open at once. Pardon me. So here is our processing, and we'll edit that too. And here's our ensemble. Same code, same thing. We just put this in. Now we're going to look in here, and after the dry sample, I think, blink, do the ensemble sample. I wonder what it's going to look like after the this one. I think I'm actually running the dry sample inside. Let's go and sort that out. With this one, I'm running the wet dry inside stereo ensemble, because we're doing all this stuff, and then the undersampling stuff shows up here just before the dither, just before you start taking the outputs, making the overall thing sound as close as possible to what the original one did. Other undersampling stuff, I'm using 192K or 96K dry. These ones, this is old school. These are 2007 plugins, so I'm going to keep it exactly how it was. So there we've got that. And then here is where we start putting in just before the dither. We don't need that. What am I doing and where? Doubler. So we've got this. See where it says input sample L, and then we're just doing a dither and going out? That's where we put the rest of this. So there we go. And let's rebalance all of that. It would be nice if reindent had a hotkey, but I don't really need one. And there we go. In this case, we do seem to have dry inside. Is that going to make any sense? Are we even using a dry in stereo doubler? I don't think we are. No, we are. So we got to move that. And again, with it, this is useful whenever you find this in a compiler. If it can do some of this formatting stuff for you, you can just hit a key and it immediately puts it to where it understands things are. And if that does not seem to be what you are doing, you've just learned something useful. Like if this C cycle equals cycles end, everything inside this is supposed to be inside the undersampling. So all of that is there. It's doing all this stuff. And then here is where it finishes up, figures out what it's going to do. And then there's our output, and it is all in line. And quick little save. We probably, no, it's all done. Build our output. We're done with that. That's in the Finder. And lastly, oh, I'm going to have to move that too, aren't I? But boop, this is the same thing we just did. Indentation is all completely wrong now. But, well, and sample frames. Oh, we have in fact updated that. And select all, format, reindent. And now that should be showing me what it's meant to be. Sometimes they'll rearrange everything quite exaggeratedly. Doesn't look like this one's doing that. We're using our doubles rather than long doubles, and this is a very ugly arrangement, but it's taking up much less space, and that's why I have it that way. And it's also showing me this stuff is super similar. Look at how similar all of this is. This is just exactly the same thing over and over again, and you can plainly see that. Although, here's a problem. This is going to fall over really hard in Linux. I was just talking about this problem. Anytime you're using rend, oh yeah, this is going to fall over and die. This is very inefficient. So this might be worth looking into in future, because that function is not going to be very good. Might be worth coming up with a way of doing it. That, or I could just ignore this part. Offset rand. Yeah, this is a attempted noise effect. Unfortunately, it's calling rand about 6 million billion times. So that's not optimal. And that doesn't actually have anything to do with the and see, I have this available. So this might be, before I'm done today, maybe I'll play with this. Firstly, that should have done it, so let's see if it builds. It does build, and I believe I can run with that, but my question becomes, Firstly, do they work? There's a stereo chorus, stereo doubler. Dry and wet. This is essentially the same thing as glitch shifter or triple spread. In fact, I should check and see if it is the same as triple spread. See, it's direct, and then it's very widened. Let's go and grab triple spread and see how that does by comparison. Airwindows T, because it's possible that he just kind of renamed it in the process of applying it. Oh, triple spread has the tightness control. And it's going a little farther. Same kind of spread. More range. I think that's enough reason to put out a stereo doubler just because triple spread has the extra stuff going on that lets you get messier. It lets you get crazier. It's doing some of the same things, but the spread effect is more extreme. And where stereo doubler has a prearranged tightness that is an optimal amount, then firstly, if you're using triple spread, you have to remember what that says, which is why you might have forgotten about it. It's because, like, well, what does that mean? I'm looking for a stereo doubler. The heck is this? And you forget it exists. And secondly, this one does this weird crackliness. It's part of glitch shifter. It's a variation on glitch shifter. Or complete desynchronization. Or complete desynchronization with very small pitch offset. So yeah, this is more your Airwindows-y style freaky stuff. But also I'm not sure this is undersampled. Whereas this is a little tighter, it's not that crackly, and it's giving you the doubler effect in a fairly extreme way, but it's a lot better behaved and the name is right. Okay, we're going to go with this. We will in fact use it. And then let's also check. I wish I had a CPU meter on this because it would be hilarious to watch. Stereo ensemble. This is the smaller ensemble. This is the larger ensemble. That's dry. So this is for the purpose of trying to make a big expandy noise. My question becomes, I want to see whether it still sounds the same without dedicated individual rand on everything, because that is expensive. This is going to fall over and die on Linux. mean, granted, this is a little antique laptop. The fact this runs it just fine. It might be straining a little bit, but also the sound that's creating, any noise effect that we're adding to this, I think is a bit moot. So let's dive in here and see what we can make happen. Xcode. Let's reopen this. And we just built that, so we just heard what it sounds like. There's our undersampling, there's our stereo dither. Here is our delay lines, and we're adding this stuff in a kind of scatter. The levels are what's causing the like delay factor is scaling up according to this. It's all within this. Oh, excuse me. I'm almost done with this coding for today. And we've got offset going on. And input sample for everything is wandering. But it is wandering everything is wandering between the nearest two samples, and offset is wandering randomly using rand a million, kabillion, zillion times. And the idea is that all of these individual taps should wander back and forth between their positions. Unfortunately, what's going on here is that they are wandering such a small amount that it's like meaningless. So, like, this exists, but I'm not happy with the bang to buck ratio of what this is doing versus how much of it you'll hear. This number of rand calls is going to wreck performance on most on Linux systems because rand can block audio threads. And I don't know what I was thinking. This is another 2007 plugin. This is like baby Chris figuring out what the hell to do. And ooh boy. Yep. And Flutter div is being scaled. So we don't necessarily want that. And you know what? The amount that it's changing is being divided by Flutter div. We're undersampling, so that let's run this again. I've just removed the scaling of Flutter div. So if I'm running this at the 192K, if this does anything, I should be able to hear it now. First, I have to place it in the thing. Alrighty, let's go. Back AU, stereo ensemble, build. I think I'm not going to worry about this. I'll make sure everything is right and then I'll recopy them. For now, we're just experimenting. There's our 192K. Does this sound like the rand is doing anything? I can simplify all of this a great deal. I mean, nobody was clamoring for stereo ensemble anyhow, so it's like I can simplify this. Stereo chorus is the one where I was getting a request for please bring this out the way it exactly was. But this, nobody's asking for this, so I can do what I please. Does this sound? Interesting, okay. That's not the same as it was. super not the way that it was. What did I just change? Well, let's get out of this 192K same thing and see if Alien Kittens is doing the same thing at 44.1. Because that's not what it was before, that's for sure. Yeah, this is what it's supposed to sound like. Tight little cluster. And then kind of sloppier. This is what it was supposed to sound like. This is the messy part. Yeah, the idea is you're supposed to put pads through this. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. I think. So now, what's going on here? Offset E. Offset is clearly something that we've got saved up. There it is. Sure enough. Seems good. Oh, okay. Okay, I see. I see. That's not as unreasonable as I thought. It's still a little unreasonable, though. Offset can be a bigger range than I was giving it credit for. Flutter div is 1500. Max offset. Oh no, offset only gets to go up to 1. That's interesting. No, it's still only 1. This is still not doing practically anything. But when I changed Flutter diff and stopped it being scaled, it started getting more into, yeah. But still, that's sounding about what I wanted, so yeah, delay factor needs to not be scaled up. My buffers might be too large for this, because that shouldn't be corrected that way any longer. Yeah, we're getting this back into shape. I have this feeling that all of this is useless. I should lose it. Like, here's what's going on, right? Offset is going between the delay time, and I can use the delay time directly, and the next delay time over. So halfway across, we're getting a averaging filter. So it's darkening stuff a little bit. But the way that it's moving, this rand divided by double rand max divided by flutter div, and adding and subtracting, that's moving very slowly. Especially when it's randomized, it's not going to end up doing much. And we're calling rand a million times. I'm going to make a command decision here, and we're going to simplify stereo ensemble. I don't think that was productive. The stuff that it's doing is not productive. We need these. We don't need offset. Level is going to be the same. We don't need flip. Oh, hang on though. No, it's still gonna... You know what? Let's just run with this. All right. We're gonna hack into this and get a result of some kind. And we're gonna make this messy rand stuff go the heck away. Unfa! Dude, good to see you. we're going to be doing more coding streams. If you like that sort of thing, then you'll be seeing more of it. I'm going to be coding streaming on Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. That is the green light matrix mode kind of thing here. So yeah, I mean, by all means, drop by. I am delighted to have you. I like Unfa. Unfa is cool. Let's see now. And that also means we're going to readjust these things, because now we are not doing 2A. And why is tree A a thing? Do we even have this anywhere? I don't think so. I don't think so. Yeah, that's not a thing. So here, let us this is going to be slightly time consuming, but doing it properly is worth the struggle. And I'm also going to want to do the H file. I have to move these windows so that I can see what Unfa is saying. Hey. But we're not using these variables anymore. Oh yeah, we can get rid of that. We can make that smaller, and we can make this shallower, and hey, there we go. You finally deconstructed the controls in Debestu. Excellent. Yeah, I mean, that's one of the challenging ones. But it does make sense. You have to use it in the way that it's designed, at which point it should basically make sense. Now let's see. H file. Some of these things we no longer need, so offset, not a thing. We're going to get basically the same effect off of this. I don't think we need this size of delay buffer, but we'll see, I guess. They seem to be in pairs. Anyways. Goodbye to 2 and 3. It's kind of like a dry wet. Part of the way that DBS and DS work is you've got the way of completely canceling it out, but you're basically doing a dry wet style, mixing the raw signal in to minimize that de-essing. So that's a way of bringing the extreme highs in as cleanly as possible by simply letting them continue to exist and be there. And then we're getting rid of all of this flip. Yeah, Unfa, you will appreciate what I'm doing with this, because the deal with this is we are eradicating all RAND in the plugin, because RAND blocks on Linux, on a bunch of other things, including this antique Mac. RAND doesn't actually block, and so I was able to run it, and it didn't really fall over and die, even though it's a much older processor. But on Linux, if you call RAND tries to be cryptographic or something, and it blocks the audio thread, and that can be a world of hurt. I think you ran into that problem with DECRECA, which I'm going to have to revisit, because DECRECA does require its RANDs. But with this, I bet it doesn't. I really bet you it doesn't. And offset I'm also not going to need. In fact, I think I have removed it. So what we're going to do firstly is step through all of these and get rid of this line, the 2A and the filling in the additional. This is doing one and the other side of a 2-sample interpolation buffer. And we won't really need to be doing that, because this is a revisit of a much older plugin. And this is the way that I would, because the thing is, if I'm not moving this delay tap, and Ensemble doesn't necessarily have to move its delay taps, and it really kind of isn't. It's only wiggling the delay tap between the two adjacent samples. That's not enough to give you chorusing. That's not enough to give you any significant change in the sound. So we're diving into this and doing the whole thing over again to make it more effective with, yeah, let's just optimize like mad here. First of all, can I build? Nope, because oh, hello. Okay, I think I know what I need to do. I don't think so, but let's look. We'll put this aside for now. And it's like, hey, I got Unfa asking questions about what the Linux thing does, and so this is a great opportunity for me to literally look at the code and see what it does. In fact, I'll specifically go to the Linux because I know that's what you've got. We'll go to the specifically Linux VST code. Hey, API Calypse. We'll open that with, well, that's not what I wanted to see happen. Let's quit it. Let's open this in something else. I don't like that. It tried to open it in the thing I was working on. This is much harder to read, but here's API Calypse. See, it's basically, it's a convolution impulse. It's a dynamic convolution impulse. So it's not only doing the convolution impulse, but it's also doing a modification factor. And that's all this is doing. I don't see random in here. It's running sines and things. And I'll tell you what else it's going to be doing. Oh, nope. Look, there's two rants. There are rants in there. That's going to be something I'll want to do something about. And again, operating this stuff, you know, this is just causing a softening effect. It's not worth the rand, especially since this is not going to handle, unless I do a whole undersampling thing, and it needs it. API Calypse is not going to work other than on like raw 44.1K. But see what this is doing to the extent that you can even read it, which is not very much. We've got this whole thing which is generating a big convolution impulse. And then we've got a distortion factor. And then we have something that I guess I built into the character plugins, which is a random factor. And it's rand divided by double rand max, meaning that it's going to give you between 0 and 1, times 0.033. All I'm doing here, oh yeah, no, there's a hard-coded IR sample that's getting dynamic convolution built into it, also hard-coded. That's what API Calypse is. But then what I'm doing at this end, the reason it's calling the rand, and it's calling it twice, is to add a 0.033 interpolation fuzz. Whereas if you had it 0.5 and it wasn't random, then what this would give you is a nearest two samples interpolation. It would soften things somewhat. It would be average. If it was at 0, it wouldn't be average. It would be just literally the the sample coming in. But what this is doing is using rand to fuzz, in stereo fuzz, by the way, stereo random fuzz, each channel. I think this is what the original chrome oxide did. Each channel gets its own individual random fuzz between no averaging and averaging between the sample and the sample after it. So it's randomly fuzzing between direct and the next sample along. But instead of being 0.5, which would be a complete average, it's 0.033. That is a very small amount. If you put it on like a sine wave, maybe you'd hear some of that. Also, if you have that technique fuzzes high frequencies more than low, which is why I used it. That's what chrome oxide did. Chrome oxide means if you have a slowly changing waveform, here, I'll quit out of this because I don't need this here anymore. We'll go back to Mac AU, and we'll go back to Stereo Ensemble, which is what we are working on. But not right there. Instead, I need to actually open the project. There we go. Because I've left it in a non-functional state, so I'm going to want to get back to that. I believe I know what I need to do to make it work, because this is now not working. But what chrome oxide did as an algorithm is, so you take a waveform or a sound or something like that, and you take the sample that you're on. That is bypass. That is just letting everything through. Take halfway between that and the next sample. If you take the two samples next to each other and average them, like this one's 0.5 of this and then 0.5 of the next, that softens high frequencies. Low frequencies end up being the same. They don't change fast enough. High frequencies, like white noise, it's going to dull it out a fair amount. And so if you're doing that, but you're randomizing the amount that it's averaging, I wonder if I've got, do I have chrome oxide loaded up? Why I have Text Wrangler open, that's not what I wanted. This is what I wanted. Sine wave. Do I have chrome oxide? Yes, I do. Chrome oxide does this. Noise. But if you had a different sine wave, like a low frequency sine wave, sine bases, and you did the same thing, suddenly you're not hearing that. The idea is that it was to emulate tape grain. And let's go and edit this a little bit, and instead we will start putting in other signs and things. Like that's bass, right? So if I generate tones here, and we give it a sine, but it's an irritatingly high frequency sine, and it had better be a lower volume than that. What's my volume level here? That looks to be about -6, so we'll call it that. That's good and painful. And now if we replicate this, if I had a tone generator that did a sweep, that would be even more fun for this, but I don't have that right on me. Effects, chrome oxide, no intensity, lows. But now if I turn the intensity up, there's a bit of a hiss on it. And if we do not save that, but open up something else, like I don't know, Alien Kittens. People always like that one. I made that on a phone one day, and it's like, whatever. I didn't bargain for this to be the greatest song Chris ever made, but whatever. Chrome oxide. If we play this, you can sort of hear it a little bit. And those hats can go from being very bright to sort of squishy. And by the way, if I have this on VST, then you've already got it. Let me just check and see that I do. VST, effects, chrome oxide. Yeah. So I don't remember exactly what bias does, but we can hear the bright hats here. Yeah, I know. And then it kind of softens the top edge of, yeah. So that'll give you a better idea of what it's doing. I don't need to be running Twisted Wave right now. I need to sort out stereo ensemble. But that's what this algorithm was effectively doing. And the part that I'm removing, you know what? I think I might just be able to update these things in place. We'll copy this. It's not being incremented. So what I'm doing is just establishing that, and then it's stepping backwards through the buffer. So in theory, this should work because we are, in fact, using we'll find out whether it works or not. If it doesn't work, it'll be a big mess and I'll have to fix it. But, you know, coding streams, sometimes it's good to make a big mess and then have to fix it. It shows people what it's like doing this kind of thing. And then we've also got this offset L stuff. We're no longer doing that. Well, I mean, I've already got a pseudorandom. See down here, FPDL is a pseudorandom that won't block threads. So the question is, I have FPDL and FPDR. I have two of these pseudorandoms. They are in fact authentically pseudorandom, and they're stepping forward once each sample. And I've defined them using rand in instantiation up here. See where we are calling rand here, but this is reset. This gets called once when the plugin gets started, so that's fine. I mean, in theory, I suppose I could still block the thread, but you got to get a true random in there somewhere. And we're like calling this once each time, so they're not going to be quite the same. I could check and make sure they're not the same, but in theory, they shouldn't be the same. And then we're running it here, so I do actually have a pseudorandom that won't block threads. But to do it the way this was doing it, I would need A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L. 12 instances of this to essentially no effect. Not 2, but 12. And I'm not really that interested in doing 12 of those when it's not going to make anything useful happen. So for now, we're going to I don't know quite why it's doing this particular thing the way that it is, but no matter. And that was it. And now, the other part of that I wasn't using. Because we are no longer doing offset C, and then the adjacent one is 1 minus offset, whatever. We've removed all of this specifically for the purpose of making it just a straight set of delay buffers. Because the amount of effort we were doing making a subtle randomization here was not helpful. Besides, we're running it in undersampling, so that should deliver its own tone to things. And the amount of catastrophic wastage in there is just not great. I'm going to have to go into DECRECA and do however many instances of the pseudorandom I need in order to make that work. But for now, I want to see whether I can make stereo ensemble work and whether it's acting like it was supposed to act. Oh, hi 2H. How did I miss you? Now let's see whether this actually runs or whether I've just broken it. Because if I've just broken it, I'm going to want to fix it. But I may have not just broken it. This might be exactly what I need. We're going to find out right now. Let's see whether it runs at all. Looks like it runs. That seems to be about the amount of sustain or decay that I have on it. That's about as tight as it was supposed to get at low depth. Effect level basically gives you the amount of surrounding stuff you get. And it is going to the sides. We are still doing that. Now let's quickly check and see whether the 192K. It's one thing I like about Mac programs is they're often designed to be able to do stuff like this. Like, okay, here's the most recent thing that you worked with. There it is right there. Go. That's sounding pretty similar. The crunchiness of moving the buffers is always messy. Yeah, if you wanted to do a sort of glitchy kind of thing, you could automate this somehow. Because there's a lot of scrunchiness. feel like maybe the random wander was doing a little something, but I feel like it was not nearly enough to justify what it was doing. I bet that's why, though. I bet that's why I had that going on. Now, why do you still say Apocalypse Proc CPP Stereo Ensemble? Oh, I see why. Yeah, it just opened it in the window of the interface, and so it started making it look like it was part of this project, which it is not. That explains it. So let's see, if I was to build this, I now have it there. If I was to go into library, which is not changed, and if I was to build it from here, I bet it's not going to work first time. It usually doesn't. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it will. This is the previous version without any undersampling. So let's do a little A/B here. So this is what we just had. I'll do Alien Kittens again, but not the 192K. And there's the one that we've just made with no rands. I'm listening to where those bass notes are. So there we are. But if we instead use the old one, let's go back and hear whether it's any different. This is the one with the million billion rands that is going to block Linux completely. Same settings, different code. Through the waveform. It feels as if maybe that has some differences, but I wouldn't call it enough. I'm listening to the tone of that synth, that's sort of honking. And then if I was to do the one that we've just done, relaunch. Let's see whether there's any significant change. I think it's like a tiny bit more static and it's a tiny bit brighter. But I don't think it's significantly better or worse. Yeah, that was not enough effect for all those rand calls. Bypass. And then And if you engage stereo ensemble, it's kind of like a reverb. Or if you have it at a much lower depth, it's blurring some of that stuff out. Yeah, this is what that effect was. And furthermore, if we do go for a higher sample rate, the new version seems to bring its own quality to the undersampled. Yeah, I think that'll work. I think that is what I was looking for from Stereo Ensemble. So we'll put aside the previous version and let's fire up Xcode again. And let's go through and like build what we've got out of all of these now that we've got them. There's stereo chorus. I'll just take a moment and check to see that it has no rands in there. No, we're good. So we'll have a stereo chorus. We'll have a stereo doubler, which is not the same thing as triple spread. Triple spread is more complicated and more capable of going wrong, and it's harder to remember the name. And I'll check to see if that has any rands in it. But I bet it does not. That's not how that algorithm works. It's a big messy algorithm, but I don't think it's all that random. Yup. We'll build an instance of that. And lastly, the stereo ensemble that we've been working on, in which now the calculation of this stuff is much simpler. Although I'm kind of interested in figuring out, like, delay factor is maximum of 1. Max delay is 7481. I think I have my buffers specified larger than they need to be. In fact, I'm pretty sure of it. I think I'm using those naive buffers. Let us... everybody likes alien kittens. It's annoying. Let's go and amend that, shall we? So if that is that much, we have a limit of this going this far. The smashing of buffers does a big mess, but that's fine. We're not worried about that. And we're going to want to adapt these delay times to the size of the actual buffer, only have it be more so. I don't believe I'm using a double buffering thing. I think I'm using just a naive buffer here. So max delay A, 7481. So I don't need to allocate a buffer of 20,000. So let's not. How about? I'll add 2 and then you'll see what I'm doing. 5. I'm going a little bit beyond in each way. Honestly, I don't need to be doing it quite this way, but no matter. In fact, so much do I not need to be doing it this way that let's change that. Two, 3, that was. And 81. I'm going to go through and do these after the fact then. Can't be using floating point numbers in array indices. Oh, come on. Be good. Thank you. Boop. I'm all scrambled here. Don't mind me. Don't try to follow what I'm doing. It'll just make you insane. The important thing is whether I can make sense of it, not whether anybody else can make sense of it. And we're going to see whether this still works once we're done with it. But here's the thing I was going to do, which is I would like to not have these all be literally the size of what it is about. I want to give a little space, so we're going to add just a little more. And now that I've done that, I have one other place where I have to do this. Oh, I could also be changing all these to double, couldn't I? Let's do that. I can make the VST easier if I don't have to update that. So, search and replace would do this faster, but I'm already thinking about other things, so I don't want to switch over to search and replace and think about what to do with that. So we're doing it the dumb, stupid way, so that I can continue to think about what I want to do next. Which is go to the CPP file and reset where these get instantiated, because I have for loops in there which need to be updated as well. Save, close, and they're right up here. Actually, come to think of it, let's open that back up again, because I'm going to use this right back again. So the array is 7491, but the amount of it that I'm using is only up to 7481. And because I tend to get paranoid about doing this kind of stuff wrong. And maybe it would be faster to just copy these things textually. And then I only want to step through as much of this because we start with, I generally leave the space to get this kind of stuff wrong. Oh, hang on. Speaking of getting stuff wrong, I specifically said I was trying to step down a little bit. It's cargo cult programming. See, if this works, it will sound exactly the same, but allocate much less memory. And often you do things like this by kind of designing them properly using constants and things, enums and so on, so that you're basically making things exactly the way they're supposed to be. I'm not always that sophisticated, so I'll make do with what I got. Sometimes my brain is just not there for handling this kind of stuff, and so we're not going to bother with it. Interesting. Why is this? I guess that's just opposite sides, huh? So this is longer than this. This is longer than this. This is shorter than this. This is longer than this. This is shorter than this, and this is shorter than this. I think we have a kind of echoey thing where they're happening in pairs, but these are stereo echoes. So they're scattered from side to side, and that's what's causing the end result here. Stereo ensemble is basically arranging these like this. One, two, three, four, five, six stereo echoes. They're doing left first and right second, but the delay lines are not necessarily the same. So you got one delay that's happening spread in time. The echo is going to be tilted to the side in stereo because it's hitting one of your ears sooner. And then other echoes are reversed in the opposite direction. And again, if this worked, it will definitely build, but then it should play without horrible scrunching noises. We're going to find out. We're going to find out right now, because that, again, is how we do these. Again, odd ones are right and even ones are left. So they're the same basic deal of you can see now they're kind of pairs. They're a scattering of 5 quick echoes, scaled up by however much you've got, but they're going to be stereo spreading, not on volume so much as time displacement, and that's how stereo ensemble works. And it should be running on already stereo material if you want to really maximize it, but that's just filling it out a little bit. And what have I got for levels? Oh, no, they are in fact doing level stuff as well. See, it's doing volume level as well, but then it is also scattering the delay. So you have immediate left-right bouncing, and then they converge. Again, that's how they're arranged. So the first echo is much more on this side, which is also going to be, well, that's interesting. What are my balances looking like? Oh, no, we're fine. That's what it said it was. So the A level of 0.75, B level of 0.15, and the delay, A, long delay, B, the quieter one, is also more delayed. So that means the one that's on the side, there's also a little stereo trickery between the side-to-side stuff going on. And that's how this works. So let's be sure that we've built the most current version. And we're going to drag it over to where its final position will be, but then also replace the last one. And now we're going to see whether this works or it just fell over and died. we're good. Nice little thumping in there. Hey, Mr. TXC. So there you have it. Stereo ensemble updated for modern computers and accelerated. Excuse me. I'm going to go off and blow my nose. And while we're at it, let's go and get these ready to there's our stereo doubler. We will be making a copy of it. And here is our stereo chorus that began all of this. And that's the one I was actually asked for. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. It's getting on towards 4 o'clock. These coding streams have an easier time of going really late. When it's the music jamming streams, it's like, oh God, doing my level best with it. But either it's like taking too much time and being too tedious, or I'm jamming, but then I'm exhausting myself doing that. Is there any difference between AIX plugins and VST3? Why, yes, they're different formats. So like I said, I am finished for the day. I'm going to make a nice cup of tea or something. Soothe my nose. My nose is giving me fits here. And I'll talk to you folks later. Thank you for joining me through this re-hacking of 3 different stereo plugins that will be coming out. I'm looking forward to doing them. Although I still have yet to do the VST versions of all of those, but since they're stereo plugins, they're fairly straightforward to do that way. I might do that off stream. And we've got Hyperson X coming out, and you can also see that I've got a plugin called Edge and a plugin called Dirt that are coming up too. And I'll talk to you folks later. Bye-bye.